You think I would have memorized which side of my head the cord comes out of by now, but I look pretty much every time.
You know how many times I was going to say I do that so many times where I'm like, oh, let me check the R and the L. Which one's which? And this is so weird. You're back, but you haven't come back on the video yet. Talking to a ghost.
Jeez.
Go ahead.
I desperately need to get a new computer. My God.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with John Hines.
Hey there.
And Randall Nolery.
Hey folks.
And we are back as always to talk about some video games, and I guess we're just going to dive right into it this week. I don't have really anything much to say on the intro. I feel like for the last few ones, I'm like, I just moved into my new apartment, I'm just getting settled in, and just rattle off the same thing every time. But at this point, I'm settled in, I'm playing games, I'm streaming semi-regularly, and just playing games semi-regularly. And I guess, just kind of wanted to give a shout out to a couple of the games that I've been playing recently on streams that I felt like kind of had some solid connective tissue. One that I played very recently, as in last night, at least at the time of recording this here, I played this game called ITTA, ITTA. And it's a game that I've actually been wanting to pick up for the longest time, and then very recently finally picked it up on sale. It was a game that our buddy Glenn actually picked up a really long time ago. It was it's very much it's a top-down, and the reason why I was kind of pairing these two games together, I'm going to talk about this game ITTA, and then after that I'm going to talk about this game Solar Ash, which I recently fired up on Game Pass, which is kind of the follow-up to Hyper Light Drifter, Solar Ash, that is, from the development team of that game. But ITTA, kind of separately from that, when Glenn and DJ and I were really into Enter the Gungeon, ITTA was another, we were just fiending for these other top-down bullet hell shooters, and this is another game that just had really pretty pixel art and just kind of caught both mine and Glenn's eye because he picked it up, and I think he played a little bit of it and said it was cool, but didn't really talk about it much beyond that. And I had, just had it on my wish list and just never got around to picking it up. Maybe it just never really went on sale, which is usually what gets me to finally spring for snagging something. And I guess it must have, because I think that's why I picked it up recently. But again, it's just a top-down bullet hell. And again, Enter the Gungeon's a really good touch point for the gameplay. You just have a dodge roll. You get a bunch of different guns that you can cycle between. At this point, I've only picked up 2 or 3 so far. And it also reminds me a little bit of the game Titan Souls. I don't know if either of you guys remember that game at all.
Ooh,
it was a earlier, or I don't know, early if that's the right word to use, but a early-ish indie game that was a little bit kind of like Shadow of the Colossus, and every boss battle was a one-hit. Yeah. I think, PS3 era, I think that's actually what I had it on, yeah.
And,
what was the developer made another game we've talked about on the podcast?
They have, and I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. But it was a game where the boss battles were all one-hit kill, and that's not the case with this game, ITTA here. But I will say, this is the most bullet hell game I've played in a long time. And you're kind of in this really luscious setting where... Again, it feels a little bit like Hyper Light Drifter, where it's kind of mysterious. It's a little more welcoming. Hyper Light Drifter feels a little bit more things might be corrupted, or it's still kind of pretty and whatever. But this game's more everything feels a little more nature infused. There's a lot of blues and greens and stones and stuff like that. Death's Door? They made Death's Door?
Yep.
No way.
Yep.
Also, I didn't know you could do that on Skype.
I know, that was
just popped up the text out here. I was like, oh man, that's a cool feature. Not even interrupting the flow of conversation, even though I did by bringing it up. But nonetheless, that makes sense though, because the combat, I thought it was something totally different, but I knew it was something where you could definitely feel that intense combat. And yeah, that's definitely the same thing here with ITTA. It's just I've played it's very much, I haven't come across any combat in the overworld areas. I'm just kind of exploring. There's a little bit of light puzzle solving, or opening up a new pathway, and then you're mostly just trying to find these bosses and then get into a bullet hell boss battle. And some of the, for one of the bosses that I was fighting, it's in such tight quarters, and my only gripe with the game is it doesn't give a lot of visual or audio feedback for when you're doing damage to a boss.
Ooh.
Until they start, they do start flashing red when they get a little lower.
Nice.
When they're maybe in their last 25% of health or something like that. But it's just hard to tell if you're really doing damage at all times. Thankfully, once I got the shotgun, I was able to just kind of didn't have to be as accurate with my aiming, could do a little more damage because the first little like kind of pistol or whatever you start off with is a little bit weak. And I've only unlocked one other weapon so far, but just like, I really like how quickly it like throws you into the mix. And then it's not a roguelike per se, but I mean, it does have this sense like you just die and then you just have to start again, take that boss on again, and just has this like real light overworld setting where like there's like a map maker that you can find, and if you find an old map, it can unlock new parts of the map in a new area, and then like a blacksmith, or I think I call it something else, but some other type of smith that can like craft these weapons. Like once you find like a weapon on like a dead skeleton's body, you can like go bring it back to them and they'll turn it into like a soul weapon or a spirit weapon, whatever it is, so it can do damage to the enemies and stuff. But it's just like really smooth, fluid. Like one of the things I really like about it is like the dodge roll doesn't really have much of a cooldown, so you can really use it to like create some space between, like just look for like a gap in the bullet pattern and do like 2 or 3 quick dodge rolls in a row to like get to that opening. But like just the bullet patterns are just absolutely crazy. It's kind of like a cool juxtaposition between like when you're just kind of exploring the world and then like, okay, super intense. And then once you beat a boss, like, okay, now it's kind of a more mellow little, bit of gameplay. It kind of even reminds me of the flow of like Creature in the Well, that like pinball inspired dungeon crawler that I played a while ago, or a long time ago, I guess, but kind of like that same like pacing to it so far. I just got to like a new area where it's like this kind of like more sky loft area and everything's just like real mysterious. You got this little like cat companion that follows you around. It kind of starts off with like a little bit of a generic story. You just like, you wake up and like your whole family's like dead in front of you and you got to like, figure out what happened. And like, but I like the way it's going. And like, there's a good sense of humor to the game. It's like, there's some heavy themes going on, but it's like approaching it in this like really light and like playful way that I'm just really enjoying a lot so far.
Nice.
Yeah, just have nothing but good things to say. I probably played the first like hour or so during that stream the other day. And then the other game that I mentioned a little bit earlier is Solar Ash. Again, this is the follow-up to Hyper Light Drifter. It's not a sequel per se, but you can definitely tell it's got some similar theming and, stylization, although it's a totally different, type of game. It's like a 3D action platformer combat, like a bunch of stuff going on. I did not know much about this game. I was actually just scrolling through Game Pass the other day to like see what else was on there, just to see. I hadn't checked it in a while, and I was like, I wonder if they've added anything that I just don't have installed that I want to check out. And I was like, this came out, I think the copyright was like 2021, so maybe this game's been out for a little while. And it's published by Annapurna, which once again they just like do not miss. So one element to this game that I didn't know was in the game is you have like inline skates almost, like instead of like running, you're just like skating. And this game is like kind of like has like a little bit of like a Shadow of the Colossus element with like some of that Hyper Light Drifter. It's also like a 3D platformer, and there's a lot of like with that inline skating, you're like grinding on rails, and like if you're thinking of like, jet grind radio kind of controls or jet set radio, it's like kind of like that, but like way more fluid. Like those games always felt real floaty to me, and like just had this like very specific control, where this like definitely feels like a 3D platformer. It takes a little getting used to, but like once you get used to that feel of the speed, and like you get like a speed boost, but like it's just such a cool, like when you're fighting the first boss you fight, and actually the second one as well, which is about as far as I made it to. And the one thing I'll say is actually right after I died fighting that second boss, the game actually crashed on me and booted me out. So I was like, well, that's a good enough place to wrap up the stream. But I'm really looking forward to playing more of this one, because like again, those like the boss battles, like so you're fighting this like giant dragon that's like going up and down through the clouds, which you can just, for whatever reason, you can just like inline skate on as fast as you want.
Amazing.
But otherwise you can just like float on top of them. But then you like, the other mechanics are you have this grappling hook, and then you also have this like slow motion, like freeze time mechanic that you can use, that mostly you're using during boss battles. So like you're like on there, and there's like these corrupted areas, and you also do a lot of like climbing on this like black goopy stuff that's like a little bit like kind of similar to like Uncharted style climbing, but again a little bit more leaning into the fluidity of like a 3D platformer. Like it's not so like, oh, you got to grab on this specific ledge and this specific rock. It's like very much like climb up, make this jump, do a double jump here, or get a running start and clear this gap. And it's just like really solid, like 3D, like light puzzle platforming, you know. But then this grappling hook, like you can use it normally as well. But then like when you're fighting the boss, like you're again like this giant dragon and like in Shadow of the Colossus fashion, you're like riding on top of it. And then there's like these spears that are like sticking in it that like, I don't know if you like when you hit them, it's like uncorrupting it or corrupting it. I don't really know 100% what's going on here. But like you essentially can like freeze time and like grapple to that. And when you freeze time, you have a way longer range with your grappling hook. And then as soon as you hit that first spear, it like starts a timer, or I don't know if it's a spear, whatever hit point that it is on the boss. And then it like triggers the next one. And then you have to like race down this like giant dragon serpent's back on your inline skates and like jump over these corrupted gaps so that you don't lose your momentum to hit the next one. And then it just keeps getting harder and harder. And like till you get to the end, you have to do that 3 times. And then you like do like one last like kind of like harpoon jab into like their, you know, sweet spot, you know, again, akin to Shadow of the Colossus, but like way more like Shadow of the Colossus felt more like you were solving a puzzle on each boss, like how to, you know, do that last bit of damage, where this feels like a little bit more action oriented gameplay, more like a Bayonetta style gameplay, you know, in that vein. But just something about like all these different elements, like the exploring the world and stuff like that, and the way it's like broken up into different worlds and different settings and stuff like that. Like I'm just really, really digging this game. It's been a long time since I played a game like that was like a full blown, I guess it's not a triple A game, but like an indie game with this kind of production,
right?
Where it's like a full blown 3D game with like all the aspects that would be in a triple A game. And I'm just like, man, this is just so much fun to like have, you know, again, though, just what I was talking about, like I said in the intro, like I wasn't going to talk about getting moved into my new apartment, but like the exact game that I was picturing, like, let's turn all the lights out, throw some headphones on. Again, I was streaming this one, but even when I play it, I probably won't stream my subsequent sessions with the game, but like I do plan on going back to it, where most of the time I do tend to play a game and go, okay, I've had my fun with it and time to play another cool game after that. And yeah, I'm just really loving it. And I do like that they kind of leaned away from, in Hyper Light Drifter, the game was like very much like a wordless, dialogue-free experience for the most part. And this one's got like some really good voice acting, very minimal, like nothing crazy or anything, but like the little cutscenes, it got me pulled in a little bit, where it's like just enough to like keep me interested in what's going on without anything, you know, bogging down my like, okay, come on, let's get on with things. Let me get to the next, you know, sequence of events. I'm really having fun with this game, and I really think it's an awesome experience. So far. But yeah, why don't I kick it over to John for some of the stuff that you've been playing lately?
That's actually like, I didn't know anything about Solar Ash until you basically started describing it, and it's actually a pretty good synthesis of the 2 games I'm going to talk about. I feel, well, at least parts of it, or at least the parts I'm going to focus on. The first game I played that I want to talk about, and I kind of want to talk about it as a capstone so that I don't have to think about this game anymore, which is me being a little critical of it, but it is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is a it's a third-person action adventure. Like, people made the comparison when it came out of like it's like Star Wars Dark Souls, and I think the more accurate is Star Wars Sekiro, based on how the combat works, and it has a lot of elements that it makes it seem like it would be a game that I would adore.
Right.
It has a lot of like hyper mobile Metroidvania in a 3D setting. Like, you're supposed to go to different planets and they all have their different biomes, and you can scan every enemy after you beat them, and it adds to their lore. And then you find force echoes, and that also gives you lore of like the history of this particular planet. And I will say, this is the first time I have given a shit about Star Wars since whatever the last movie came out was. Like,
I was just going to ask, like, where were you coming from on the Star Wars side of things?
That movie effectively killed any interest I had in it as a media property.
It was a terrible movie.
Dang.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of them. Yeah.
It was enough to make me just like really question, why do I care about this series? Like why do I follow this? And there are reasons, and the reasons were like this game actually had a really good story, or at least really good for Star Wars. And I think that is also the caveat, where there was plenty of moments where it was very clear that this is a major first-party video game made in a Star Wars property, and like half of it was really good and really interesting in terms of storytelling. It takes place after Order 66, which is in the prequels when the Sith wipe out, or the Clone Wars like wipe out all of the Jedi and turn them into a non-entity in the Star Wars universe. And then that comes back in the episode A New Hope, when the Jedi are resurrected in Luke Skywalker. And like that was an interesting setting to be in, and I like really interesting for a former Jedi Knight who is in hiding after leaving the Order, or like in this new like upcoming empire. And there are still people who are talking about how things used to be under the Republic and how the Empire is, and like it's a really interesting.
That is a cool setting.
But like it is also one of the first AAA games I've played that aren't kind of auteur games, I feel like, or like just super niche. Like I play the AAA games I play are predominantly like Monster Hunter, or like JRPGs, which have like a ton of story or something, like a very like singular focus in them. And this was made by the Star Wars media conglomerate, and it was it was the first time I had to log in with an EA account.
It's EA too, right?
Yeah. I had to, so you have to play it while you're online so that you can sync, and like so many hoops that I had never really had to run into before playing any games. And like that already put kind of a sour taste in my mouth, but then actually playing the game, and I prefer a platforming or Metroidvania where you are fully in control of the character, and so much of this game just feels like quick time events, where it's like, oh, you run up to this wall, like this type of wall that has horizontal lines on it, and that will start an animation of you running along that wall, and then you press A at the end of that run to jump onto another. It's like, or then you have to jump, and then you will, like, if you're close enough to a vine, you will swing on the vine, or you can use your force powers to like repel and parry attacks. And like that's the part that is interesting, because it does feel like a power fantasy of like using force,
which that's cool.
And like you were talking about too, it's like it's cool to be like in an extended setting of like a movie or a franchise or whatever that you're already familiar with, and like getting to see like an extended version of that. Like you're not just playing through like the movie plot, you're like seeing like outside of that. It's always
digging
really cool,
a little deeper at a specific point, right? And just exploring that, right? Yeah.
But let me tell you, when also the method of delivery of narration is while you're in a transitory mode of like moving along this ledge, and then they're going to say dialogue to you, and like that, then let's say you die, and then you just have to do that section over again, and there's nothing there, but it was that section of the environment was built specifically for a conversation to happen. And when you're going back through it, just because a Metroidvania makes you like backtrack a lot and go through and traverse like through areas of the map over and over again, and there's just nothing there. And the point of that stretch of the environment was just to like pad out, like so much of this game like just irritated me in ways that like weren't necessarily enough for like me to stop playing it right away. But eventually I did just get to the point where I realized I was thinking of it more as a chore than like excited to play the game.
Yeah.
And I made the call and I uninstalled it, and I said, you know what? I had a good enough time with this game. I don't know what sale I bought it at, but I know I didn't pay full price for it.
Right.
But I'm fine and content with not remembering what my EA login is ever again. And moving on.
Yeah,
And
that's totally fair. That is such a sour feel. Like when you're just trying to like fire up a new game for the first time, it's like, wait, I gotta log in or I gotta create an account. That's just such a lousy way to start an experience. I get it if I'm like firing up a free to play game for the first time or something, but when I'm like, hey, I'm firing up a single player campaign, like I'm not expecting to dive into that. Yeah.
Accept the terms and agreements. Create your account.
here's the end user licensing agreement.
Pull up your phone to get the
consent
activation code.
Yeah, seriously.
So I did put it down, and I picked up a game that has been on my radar for years now, and is also an Annapurna.
I was just gonna say another Annapurna
gravity-based game
Nice.
of Outer Wilds, and
yes,
holy shit, that game's so fucking good.
I've heard nothing but amazing things, and when you started raving, I mean, again, I know we were even talking about before we started here, like, but I think we were talking about it in regards to music, but like you and I don't always have the same taste, but like every now and then, you know, there's just something that like, hey, this resonates just in general. But this is a game I've just heard from quite a few different people or review sources. I can't remember where I've even heard of it, but I've just heard a number of people mention this and talk about how amazing it is, where it's like, okay, that just piqued my interest enough.
And like so
I'm
much
to hear
of
what
it
you have to say.
is just, it's a game that doesn't, it's a Metroidvania, but the gatekeeping elements of the Metroidvania are just you figuring out puzzles and realizing that you can do more things with the tools you already have at the beginning. Like there's an intro section that introduces you to like the basic mechanics, and you poke around a little bit, you try them, and some of the controls for like space flight are incredibly difficult right off the bat. But I'm at the point now where I've just been playing it and there's been no additional power-ups, no additional like abilities, just me like exploring and finding new things and playing around with the base mechanics. And I am so good at space flight right now. And
Nice.
I didn't really expect that to happen as maybe quickly as it did, or as like, because like right off the bat, it felt so hard. Like it really did feel difficult in like a way that I'm kind of used to, like physics-based puzzles, or like we've talked about this about Tears of the Kingdom and how like control scheme was really simple for me, and like I was able to like visualize moving objects in 3D space and be like, all right, I know the exact movements I can make, because like that's at least on like pivots of like an octodirectional 3D sphere.
Yes.
Whereas this is like right off the bat, they're like, oh, you want to test out with this little like spaceship drone to try to land on a thing, and I could not do that for the life of me. And I was like, oh my God, is that what this game is going to be?
Kerbal Space
Is it going
Program?
to be me just like crash? Yeah, I mean, it really is a Kerbal Space Program with, what was the other game? I was like, it's Myst, like in the way that like you have all the tools to figure out these puzzles. It's just kind of like thinking about them, and that's all I've been doing is just thinking about this game. And like when I was falling asleep last night, I realized something, and I was like, oh God, I can't believe I'm going to bed right now. I've got to like wake up. So
That's a great feeling.
And that's got to be painful when you've got that Steam Deck, knowing like I could just be literally playing this in bed right now.
Oh,
fair.
But yeah, I really highly I had avoided spoilers for this game for years, and like anytime anyone would talk about this game, I would just be like, nope, turning this off, and I hope that I kept this as vague as possible because I really want to talk about this game, but I also really don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't played it. It's just, if you like puzzle solving and poking around and exploring, I think that this is a masterpiece in so many ways, but like particularly without without getting into specifics, I don't want to like even recommend other games that it's like, because I feel like that might give away something. But I had a friend who, I have other games in my mind that I'm also not going to say on this podcast that I know that this friend plays, but I also knew that he played like all of the Myst games, and I was like, if you liked Myst, play this game. Like I'm just going off of that recommendation. I feel like that's as vague as possible.
Yeah, that's pretty vague. Not a lot of Myst games getting made these days, I'd say.
That's for sure. Yeah, I'm bummed this one's not on Game Pass anymore, because I know, Randall, you said you fired this one up too, right?
When it was on Game Pass. Yeah.
Same here. I played like the first like maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes of just like whatever like the opening bits were. And I remember thinking like, man, the space flight, I remember thinking like, man, there's like some weightiness to this. Like you really got to get used to the feel and like the heft of everything. And yeah, when John started talking about it, I was like, I've just been like waiting for the right time to play this one. And then sure enough, it's not on Game Pass anymore. Not to say that it isn't a game I wouldn't, consider buying, but it's just one that I'm like, I don't have I wouldn't buy it on Switch if it's, I don't even know if it's available on Switch. But it's one that I'd probably want to be running on a more powerful hardware.
Which I'm looking at the versions too, and it's like, I wanted to ask you too, John. Do you have the Archaeologist edition of Outer Worlds or
what
Outer
does
Wilds?
That mean?
Sorry.
Yeah, I know, because there is Outer Worlds came out at like the same time too. There were like two of those games. I remember that being a
which
thing.
I remember. I only remember which one is Outer Wilds because of the mnemonic device that the developer said on Twitter, which was, you can tell which one's Outer Wilds because it's the one I worked on.
Oh, that's
no
so
I
dumb,
in
but
Outer
that's so
Worlds.
good.
Oh no, I don't have the DLC, but I will say that because that's what is included in the Archaeologist edition.
Gotcha.
And the I think the Echoes of the Eye.
Yeah.
It's on sale, hyped. So I know I'm doing the thing that I do. So I'm just poking around. Yeah.
Oh, but it's so good, man. Like the other thing that I was gonna say is that like I vague posted about it on social media, and instantly I had friends who had never mentioned that they had ever played the game, like in my mentions, just like texting me and being like, this is a life-changing game.
Dang, I need to play this one then, especially with that Annapurna tag on there. And I know there's just another, I hope this isn't spoiling anything at all, because the only thing I know about this game is that there's some kind of like real-time element going on.
Dude.
And that's all I know.
Dude, I do want to say this game is one of the most impressively built games I think I've ever encountered.
Dang.
In a way that like I feel like Portal and Half-Life were tech demos so that like Valve could show off how their physics engines worked.
Sure.
Like this is doing stuff that I didn't think games could do.
What in the world?
Okay.
And like in a way that like you think about Kerbal Space Program and like that's an impressive display of like
just physics engines and what you can do. Yeah.
And like that is in a way that is just, I think, impressive from a technical standpoint, but like extrapolate that into like making a game with puzzles in it.
And like a narrative and like,
like in the same way that like Baba Is You would release like, or put you in a situation where you're looking at like the things in front of you and like, I know there's a solution here. I know that there's like something that I'm not getting or understanding or applying.
Yeah.
And the moment of realization is exactly the same.
Ooh.
Okay. Well, count me in for adding this one, to my list of somewhere. Yeah. Again, I'm not going to pick it up on Switch, but once I someday get that Series X, maybe I'll scoop it up on there.
I just want to talk about this game, which is also why I know like my friends immediately were like, thank God someone we can talk about this game with.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to spoil it. It's so good.
Nice. Well, yeah, maybe have you finished it? No, I'm assuming.
Not even close.
Maybe we'll circle back around to it when you finish it or something, or maybe if Randall and I get a chance to fire it up at some point, because it's one that you've definitely like. It's on that level of like, I have Return to the Oberdins, my resolution game this year, and for me, it's like on that level of like, okay, this is like a game that's like pushing what a video game can do, and how you can present it and what. Yeah, I just
since
I don't know.
It kind of sounds like it'd be fun to watch as the person not playing it too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of tickling the back of my brain a little bit too. Okay,
couch solo co-op, experience hybrid.
I guess I didn't really think about it. It's like, I guess Super Mario Galaxy did do some of this. So it's not like completely uncharted waters in terms of like gravity sources and like stuff.
But it's totally different feeling.
It is.
It's not like a 3D platformer.
Right. Exactly.
Just different. Yeah.
Right. And like you're not
the scope.
Like the levels built in Mario Galaxy are specifically like just a like warped version of a typical Mario game of like level design and stuff, which is still great. Ooh,
one of my favorites.
Mario Galaxy.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Mario Galaxy.
But why don't we kick it over to Randall here for to wrap things up?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a great through line there. I think Airzonk is a life-changing game. That's a TurboGrafx game.
Hey, that works.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the Analogue Pocket Adapters, which I had to look to see when did I place the order for the Analogue Pocket Adapters, and that was October 21st, 2022, and I received them in March of 2024. Wow. So it's been a minute.
Wow.
But that gave me plenty of time to collect, as I want to do, the platforms associated.
2 years. Yeah, no, that's a long time, dog.
I'm used to it. This is always how it goes in this world of like buying weird, special things meant for retro shit. It's always a year wait minimum, always, at least.
Yeah.
It's just how it goes. I'm used to it. All the Kickstarters, all the whatever
even the
else.
Games, like the indie like retro games, the homebrew stuff.
Oh, all of it. Yeah, the homebrews for sure. Which so I'll get into some of that too. But so okay, the pocket adapters. It's for the Analogue Pocket, which is the handheld analog system. It's done very well. It's been very successful. These pocket adapters. Machine. It's beautiful. It's so nice.
Yeah.
But these adapters expand the games that you can play on this thing. Originally you're just talking about basically the Game Boy line, and then it was easy enough to get the Game Gear adapter. This 3-pack is the Atari Lynx, which is the handheld Atari platform.
Okay.
Which is, I always eyeballed whenever I'd go into a retro shop. It had such a weird design where like a lot of games took advantage of its kind of like its proportions, where you could play tate mode on a lot of games, kind of like arcade style, like vertical screen.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and especially because the one side had like 4 buttons, but they were kind of split like 2 and 2 on either side, so you could do some kind of weird like single handheld console multiplayer action on some of those sort of things. Very interesting.
Okay.
I like I like what they were going for. It was not very successful, but I like what they were going for. So it had
something new. Yeah.
Yeah. They had the Atari Lynx. Neo Geo Pocket / Neo Geo Pocket Color is another adapter, and that in particular was one that I'd always eyeballed hard. Whenever Kevin, you and I would go in Crazy Frenzy, whatever the retro game place was actually called, I don't know. Whenever we would go in that place, they would always have those like clamshell packs of like just the loose handheld games. There'd be 4 of them in like a clamshell, and they'd sell them for like no money. These Neo Geo Pocket games, And I always eyeballed it like, should I buy that? It's like $10 for like 4 games. Like, no, I don't need to buy another system. It's fine. Now it costs a lot more than that, but that's okay. And then the third adapter was TurboGrafx / PC Engine / Super Graphics, which I think is the real big meat and potatoes there, because it's basically doing what well, now I can't think of what the portable TurboGrafx is called. Oh God, that's gonna bother me. Anyway, Turbo Express.
I was gonna ask, when you mentioned that it was a Lynx adapter. How many Lynx games did you own prior to buying the adapter?
0.
Okay.
And was it the same for Neo Geo Pocket too? Because
Yes.
I was gonna say I was gonna assume that only the Turbo was the stuff that you had some going in.
Bingo. Yes, I had a lot of Turbo games, but I knew games like Air Zonk, which is the side-scrolling shmup. You take Bonk and you put him in a cute 'em up environment, which I love cute 'em ups. And it's colorful and vibrant in the way that a lot of TurboGrafx games are, and it's just, I think that game's brilliant. So that was the only game I even tried on the TurboGrafx adapter so far, but it ran just flawlessly, and I'm like, oh shit, we're doing
Air
this.
Zonk looks so cool.
Yeah,
It's a
love it.
cool looking game. It's got a lot of personality. It's got that like comic book presentation.
Very much.
I think I played
so.
that one on like Wii Virtual
Yes.
Console. I think I had that. Yeah.
Air Zonk is fantastic. That's one of my favorite. I think that's one of my favorite shmups, like just period. Just to play.
Really, I got to go back and fire that one up again sometime. Then.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's a Hudson Soft.
Oh yeah, baby! Lots of good Hudson Soft stuff on the Turbo.
Yeah, they were big time supporters. Yeah, those Bomberman games.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yep. But yeah, no Atari Lynx games, no Neo Geo Pocket Color games going in. But I'm like, yes, this is my sicko excuse to buy these things now before these other nerds can get their hands on my games and they go too much up in price. So I did so. I actually had some credit at a local retro store from 2019, so I burned that finally.
Dang.
A month or two ago on some. I got like some random Atari Lynx games. The only one of those that I popped in was a game called Warbirds, which is like a cockpit. Like you're in like an old, I don't know, like an old school style like plane, and you're in the cockpit, but you're talking about like less than 16-bit graphics. And it
Okay.
it's impressive for what it is. I don't know that it's all that much fun to play these days, sort of thing, but
right.
glad I have it. The one big one that I was like, hell yes, I'm getting the Atari Lynx adapter is actually a homebrew game called Zaku. And when I play Zaku, I'll probably come back and talk about it on this podcast, because Zaku was released by a homebrew publisher called Super Fighter Team. And they released a whole bunch of homebrew releases for the Genesis, mostly RPG games that were either released or not finished in like Asian countries. They would pick these games up and then develop them to completion, translate them, and publish them as Sega Genesis titles. And this was before most any other, homebrew publisher was doing anything on the internet. Think like 2009, 2010 territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I followed them a lot, and I bought games like Beggar Prince and Legend of Wukong, and these games are worth like ridiculous money now because they publish, however many hundreds of copies probably.
Right.
And then, there's even a game that I had backed, and the guy decided to cancel it because I don't know why. It was like a strategy RPG in like 2019, but yeah, I appreciated the love of the Sega Genesis, and then I caught wind of this Zaku, and Zaku looks like Air Zonk, and I'm like, oh my god, it's another spiritual successor to Air Zonk. I need to get this, but I can't buy a whole nother platform just for one game. That's ridiculous. So then this came around, and I managed to get a copy of Zaku. So I'll be talking.
Gotta love
about
Analogue for that, for bringing these like kind of retro, very obscure systems kind of back to life.
Yes. I love it.
Cool.
And then Neo Geo Pocket Color has been the real meat and potatoes of what I've experienced so far, because there's some damn good games on that thing, I'll say.
I love the look, like the aesthetic of a lot of those games.
It's very, like, there's kind of a through line on all these systems where it's like, Kevin, you kind of called it like 12-bit in the past, where it's it's not quite 16-bit, but it's definitely more involved, and, you know, there's a lot more you can do performance-wise than 8-bit.
Like more frames per animations and stuff like that. Like there's just certain things. I think I was just saying this about another game on that I was streaming the other day, and I was like, it's almost like a 12-bit kind of vibe.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it is, and I love that. That's like a sweet spot for me. And Neo Geo Pocket Color I love too, because it's taking there's only 2 buttons on this system. It's just A and B.
Okay.
And it's just like they maximize that, and I love like the design constraints of that. And then, you know, on the actual Neo Geo Pocket Color, there's a clicky stick. It's like, think of like the 3D slider pad on the 3DS, but clicky, and that's, you kind of are getting close to what it actually is. Like clicky on purpose, like it
slots in with, so you know that you're in the octadirectional.
Yes, to mimic like an arcade stick, right?
Okay, I was
that's
thinking
the thought process.
Okay, at first I thought you meant kind of like how the GameCube, you know how it almost has like the little like octagon like kind of cut out in the controller, so it kind of like notches in. But this is more like like an arcade. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and actually 8-Bit Do released a Neo Geo controller that based on firmware updates actually works with the analog dock. So I was able to play some of those games with a clicky controller as well, you know, docked, which was fun. But yeah, they've got demakes of like you know, the Metal Slug games, and I only played the first mission. I'm like, shit, this is good. This is just fun to play. Like I'm not even like, you know, even like trying to make exceptions for concessions of like, oh, you know, it's not going to be quite like the Metal Slug craziness where that's like 32-bit mayhem, and it's just like, it's not that, but it is Metal Slug, and it's so much fun to play, actually, like on its own rights, I think.
Oh, they're 2 King of Fighters games.
Yes.
I'm looking at the libraries for these. And
I know I picked up a game on
Samurai
Switch
Showdown?
like a long time ago. I think it's just called Pocket Fighter, and it's like a fighting game very much like based on like the Neo Geo Pocket era of fighting games. And I bought it strictly because I was like, I just love this aesthetic. And it's actually a pretty cool game. I'm just playing it by myself, so I just never found anybody to really play it with, so I never got too into it. But it was a cool game, but I pretty much bought it strictly because I was like, I just love this Neo Geo Pocket, like the color palette they use. I don't know if there's like a limited, you know, number of colors they have, but it's just something about it. It's almost like a Pico 8. Yeah. It's like if Pico 8 was like 16-bit somehow or 12-bit. It's like it just reminds me.
It looks like it says that it has 4,096 colors, 146 colors on screen at time. And I'm like, that's unbelievable. That's a lot.
Yeah, I think that might even be more than the Genesis could do for colors at the same time anyway. So for what that's worth.
God.
But it's just, it's fun. I love these sort of like streamlined experiences where it's like, this is what we have to work with and we're maximizing it. And like there's a Sonic game that's basically a demake of Sonic 2 that plays really well. Sonic the Hedgehog Pocket Adventure. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yep. There's these 2 of these games, and I bought both versions, of course, as SNK vs. Capcom Card Fighters Clash, and those are supposed to be like the games for the Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Yeah.
I will also come back to this podcast with info on that when I finally get around to playing them. Yeah. But those games have a cult following on their own to the point where subsequent games in that series have been released on like I believe on 3DS, maybe DS as well, and some other
like
platforms.
Mobile even or something.
Yeah, the big following.
Yeah, just the fact that this like adapter set gave you the excuse to dive into these other consoles that you've never had. Because Neo Geo, I've always like kind of steered away just because like I don't like it's just SNK.
Where are you going to find a
do I really
working,
want?
Yes,
exactly. What if something breaks? Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah. let alone like the actual platform. Like you get a Neo Geo Pocket Color. Well, that's not backlit, at least from my recollection. So you get to mod it. You have to do these things.
Can't hook it up to my TV unless I do something crazy. Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
Let alone if it's in good enough shape in the first place,
right?
Because it's going to be old and used.
Yeah. Now all you got to do is worry about ponying up the cash for the games. But other than that,
yeah, some of them are already getting quite pricey, and I guarantee you that the Analogue Pocket Adapter release had something to do with that. So I knew that was breathing on my neck, and I grabbed what I could, kind of like I did with Game Gear.
But maybe people will be like how they've been doing limited run releases of physical releases of other like maybe now it's an excuse to like put those ROMs on, like, I don't know, a physical cartridge, just so people have another way to buy it.
Although that starts getting pricey too, though, those re-releases and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're basically buying a full brand new game, which is, I don't have a problem with if it's something I want, but it's like, man, I can't buy every one of these because I got to start being choosy.
Per.
Yeah, exactly. I got to start being choosy about which one of these retro collector items I want,
But if people get back into those SNK versus Capcom card,
you really piqued my interest with those two games.
People love those games.
It looks so good.
Yeah,
they released them on DS.
So there's a DS version for sure. Because I took a hard look at that before I even knew any of this was going to happen. I'm like, I was just collecting DS games at the end of that era, and it was one of those. And I'm like, ooh, should I get it? And then I think that became prohibitively expensive as well. And off of my top of my head, I think there might even be a bug in it in like the physical release or something, and that scared me. So there's something to that effect.
Fair enough.
But, now the shops are shut down. So
I know. There's a bunch here. There's a lot of like very simplified 2D fighting games that just play fun. And it just, I can just grab this thing and play a simple thing that I don't need to use a lot of brain power for or whatever for a split second. Then I can idle it again like you could clamshell the DS and, go along my merry way. And that's fun.
That rules.
The adapters fit right in. They're small. It's cool.
Heck yeah. Yeah, just adding more value to that Analog Pocket that was already awesome.
Yeah, it's a good time. I'm for it. I will speak more about it in the future.
Yeah,
nice.
Looking forward to you circling back to some of those games you mentioned. Definitely.
Oh, yeah. I bought enough of them.
Yeah, I don't know. Any other stuff we want to chat about before we wrap things up for this week, guys?
Not this week.
Yeah, same.
All right, good deal. So yeah, as always, you can find us on the internet at pursuingpixels.com and pretty much anywhere else, Pursuing Pixels. And until next week, we'll catch you then, and take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The unlicensed Lynx games.
Yeah,
this is so cool. I love it.
Is there a list?
Game looks sweet.
Yeah, it's on the Wikipedia.
You know what?
It includes.
That doesn't surprise me though, because like Atari Age is a thing, and they release homebrews like every year for certain conventions and stuff.
Flappy Bird is on Atari Lynx.
That's
I kind of love that.
And Load Runner.
That's great.
Oh man, that rules.